Walters, we would have a meeting. But without any of them, we won't have a meeting. Savornich is ill. He won't be here today. So we need Mr. Pacheco, Mr. Wax, Ms. Walters. We understand Mr. Wax and Ms. Walters are not in the building. That leaves Mr. Pacheco. We have a quorum. What happened to my agenda? All right, good morning. This is a meeting of the Los Angeles City Council on May 15th, 2001. The council meets Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's supposed to be at 10 o'clock. It's usually at 10:30. We are today at 10:31. Council meetings are broadcast live on our city's cable television channel, Channel 35, and on audio at 213-621-CITY, or 818-904-9450 for the Valley, or 310-471-CITY for the West Side, or 310-547-CITY for San Pedro and environs. And with that, let us begin by calling the roll.
Berzinchik, Fuhrer, Hernandez, Holden, Miskowski, Pacheco, Padilla, Ridley Thomas, Savornich, Wax, Walters, and Galanter. 11 members present and a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you. First item.
Approval of the minutes.
Without objection, the minutes are approved.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
And without objection, those are approved.
Before starting the regular agenda, there's a few items to be continued. Item number 5, a request from Councilmember Holden to continue that matter 1 week until May 22nd.
All right. Is there any problem with continuing item 5? It is continued 1 week.
Items number 10 and 11, the Los Angeles Housing Department and the affected council districts recommend receive and file, 10 and 11.
Okay. Any objection? 10 and 11 are received and filed.
Item number 35, a request from Council District 11, Ms. Miskowski, to continue the matter 1 day until May 16th.
All right. Item 35 will be continued until tomorrow.
On the regular agenda, item number 6 is the mayor's appointment of Jane Murphy Shapiro to the Environmental Affairs Commission.
Ms. Shapiro? Members of the council? Ms. Miskowski?
Move approval. Ms. Shapiro has served on the Commission of Status of Women in an exemplary manner, and I think will be a fine candidate. Hopefully, we'll be able to keep her for longer than the next 40-some days.
Okay. Anybody else? Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Thank you. You're approved. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I hope it was worth the trip downtown.
It was. Thank you very much.
Forthwith on that, please.
Madam President, item number 1 is an item notice for public hearing.
All right. We do not seem to have any cards on item number 1. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on item number 1? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Members of the council? Mr. Burnson, are you getting ready to speak?
No, just on item number 2.
Okay, hold on. Let's do item 1 first. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That's approved.
There is an ordinance involved with that which will be carried over 1 week for a second
Yes.
reading
Are
on
we
the
expecting
22nd.
another member? Well, if we do, we'll reconsider and do it again. Okay, next.
Items number 2 through 4 on the regular agenda are items for which public hearings have been held.
All right, we do have a card on item 3 in opposition, but there has already been a hearing, so unless there's another
Madam President,
motion. Yeah.
item
You
number
want to call 3
2,
special? All right.
yeah, item number 2, we need to receive and file the original ordinance, and the city attorney has brought forth a new ordinance that covers the actions of the planning committee, and I would move receive and file on the old and approval on the new ordinance.
Okay, and can you just tell us or somebody tell us in 10 words or less what the difference is?
Ask the city attorney.
Gail? No.
No, it was transmitted without,
So you don't know what the difference
no, I
between?
don't. But I can look in the
Gwen
file if
looks
you
like
want to
she's
hold it.
about to
and
tell
I'll
me.
look.
Do you know?
Is that on item 2? Madam Clerk, on item...
Yes.
Madam President, on item 2, I think the only difference is the issue of changing a Q condition to disallow automotive uses.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know. All right. Okay, so Mr. Bernson's motion is to receive and file the ordinance as it appears on the agenda and adopt instead the ordinance that eliminates the auto uses. Okay, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
That's approved, and we'll carry over 1 week unless we get a 12th member.
Okay. Currently, item number 3 has been called special
Yes.
by both Ms. Kowski and Chick, and so item 4 is before you.
All right, item 4 is before us. Anybody have a comment? Open the roll on item 4, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
All right, that's approved. Does anybody know whether Mr. Pacheco's coming today? Because if he is, we can hold the ordinances. Yeah, I guess we might as well. Okay, we did item 6, right?
You
Yes.
did item 6.
Okay, let's
7, 8, and 9 are ordinances.
Hold
so
those
be-
on the desk.
Brings you to items 12 through 31.
All right, we have cards on 12, so we'll call that special. We have cards on 20, so we'll call that special.
Item 24 also requires a motion. I believe that that matter may be received and filed, which is 24B, inasmuch as 18 addresses the same concerns as contained in 24.
Okay, but we haven't done 18 yet. So you want to have
So-
us vote on 18, and part of the vote would be receive and file 24? Right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Any specials, members of the council? Items 13 through 24. Any specials? 13 through
13
20?
through 31.
13 through 31. Going once? Going twice? Open the roll on items 13 through 19, 21 through... What do we have?
21 through
30.
24 if you're adopting, if there's a motion
Yeah.
for...
Yeah,
B.
that will, well, all right. Mr.
Madam Chair, if we could just withhold item 30, I think we're going to be hearing it as part of item 36.
If I
Yes.
might
Yeah.
suggest, I think that maybe you maybe want to amend that, or either receive and file this or
Item 30.
amend it.
Yeah, we'll receive and
To
file
ask that
item
we
30.
hear it today because it is on the agenda as item 36 for
Okay.
closed session.
Let's hold item 30 till we do item 36,
Okay.
and then we can
Okay.
get rid of item 30. So what we have before us is items 13 through 19 and 21 through 29 and 31.
And
right?
31.
And with a motion, Mr. Hernandez moves to receive and file 24. Any specials? Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
Those are approved, and we need forthwith on item 18 and 22 and 23. Okay.
Item 32A is a closed session item that will remain on the desk.
Yes.
So then before you is 32B through 34.
Okay, items 32, let's see, we have cards on item 33. We'll call that special.
And if we don't have a card on item 34, I'll call that
We
special.
do not, so...
Special on
we'll
34.
call that one special, and we have cards on 33.
So currently before you is 32B.
Okay, 32B. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
That is approved. Good job. We got through a lot of it here. But now we go back to,
Go back to item number 3, called special
yes,
by
sorry,
Ms.
item
Kowski.
3. Ms. Mizikowski, we do also have one card of someone against the proposal. But we have already had a hearing. Go ahead.
Madam President, this is the issue on the ordinance for the citywide system of neighborhood councils. And although we have the second reading of the ordinance before us, we also have a draft by the city attorney of a new version of the ordinance as recommended by the city council and as recommended by some changes of the ad hoc committee on the budget, which looked at the done budget for next year and made some changes. I think the only significant issue in the change in the ordinance is the removal in the ordinance of the matching funds provision and the requirement through the city's budget process that grants will be made available, but they will not be competitive matching fund grants. And I would like to move the substitution of the new first reading of the ordinance as drafted by the city attorney and available today as a substitute for the second reading of the ordinance we adopted last week.
Chair recognizes Ms. Galander.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's time on this, but the one concern I have is that what the ad hoc committee has recommended is different from what the council recommended when we had all the neighborhood council people here to testify. I don't know how many of those people went to the ad hoc committee, but it seems to me that particularly since we're dealing with the opening round of neighborhood councils, that we really ought to give the public a little time to review this change and let us know if they have any concerns with it or not. And I would think that if we continued this until, say, Friday, we would at least give them a chance to be able to tell us there's no problem with the changes or they do see a problem with the changes. I just want to remind you that the people who came and testified were absolutely fabulous. I asked them to be concise, and they were concise. They were a little nervous about the fact that many of them wanted to say more than they did, but in the interests of time and consideration for everybody else in the room and the rest of the agenda, they really held themselves in. And so I'm very concerned about doing this today without giving them a chance to come back and say whatever they have to say about the changes that were made by the ad hoc committee. Because as I recall, there were some concerns about the need to get money without having to go through a grant process, at least at the beginning. I understand there are good reasons why the ad hoc committee felt that there was another way to do it. I just think it's only fair to have the public come in. So I would like to suggest that we continue this until at least Friday, just to give them a chance to
Okay,
come.
we have a motion to continue to Friday. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Mizikowski, do you wish to speak?
I think that the changes that the ad hoc committee made and that are in the ordinance were precisely what came from the motions that the council put in on last week after the testimony of the public, and particularly making sure that there was money by way of the Department of Neighborhood Services and Empowerment providing that direct assistance by way of the access centers of printing, postage, copying, and that kind of facilities that the neighborhood council, that those testifying asked for, as well as incorporating what the neighborhood groups talked about in terms of not having to have matching grants, but just direct access to grants available. And so I think that this does incorporate that. I have no problem with continuing it, except, and I want to have Ms. Chick and perhaps the city attorney tell us, we want to make sure that we have the votes to adopt something, because all of those changes that we incorporated, both those by committee and those that were brought in by motion on the council, if we don't adopt it, the original plan of the commissioners goes into effect within a certain time frame. So we are very, very tight time constraint on this.
Yes, the chair recognizes our president.
I'm sorry, I thought we adopted the
I
plan.
don't have your...
Didn't we, well, maybe you
Oh,
can
I do
clarify
now.
this for me. Didn't we adopt the plan anyway? We just didn't adopt the funding, because that was going to come through separately.
We had the first reading of the ordinance to adopt the plan, yes. Today is the second reading. And because the plan is being amended, and if I could have the CLA at the table, because I want to have this explained exactly right. I think, Mr. Gerard, you had recommended to me that the way to keep this going was to amend the plan. If you could just explain it.
The council adopted the plan on Tuesday and had a first reading of the ordinance on Tuesday. On Friday, the ad hoc committee on the budget recommended that there be changes to the ordinance in the way that neighborhood councils are funded. So the amended ordinance, if the council so chooses to adopt the ad hoc committee's recommendations, would be out of sync with the plan. So
Also go back to first reading.
correct. You go back to first reading, and then you just have to make a motion that requests that the plan be
Amended to be in
revised.
sync with the
Right,
ordinance.
to be in sync with the ordinance,
And so
correct.
today becomes the first reading.
of the ordinance, of the amended ordinance per the ad hoc committee's instructions.
Right. So it's an amended ordinance and therefore the first reading. And
Correct.
I don't know if my clock has started or because I wanted to speak. Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Colleagues, I urge that we act on this today, and I'm very respectful of Councilmember Galanter's concerns, because more than anything else that we have dealt with here in a long time, certainly neighborhood councils and the plan for their certification is something of great import and interest to the public. But first of all, the change before us, as Councilmember Misikowski stated, is not changing the substance and the intent and the vision of the council. And while I might have preferred for the funding part of the plan to stay exactly as it was when it went to ad hoc, I think what the committee did made a great deal of sense. First of all, one of the most important changes is that the department has come to the table and said, we will be giving the resources for operating expenses directly to neighborhood councils. And one of the reasons your governmental efficiency committee said give dollars directly to councils for operating expenses was because there'd been nothing in the plan about money at all, and no discussion from the department about staffing and equipment and meeting places and all of that. That's being given. The goal here is to make sure that neighborhood councils receive the resources they need. And the Ad hoc Budget and Finance Committee did that. And what they did not prohibit in future years through the budget process, if future councils decide that they want to give money directly to neighborhood councils for operating expenses, that they want to have a matching grant, or that they want to change the proportion of funding, that should be left very flexibly year to year to the mayor and the council to work out in the budget process. But what remains intact is the council's vision that to be successful, neighborhood councils must receive the resources they need. And the change ad hoc made was to say, department will give operating expenses through the department. And when councils are certified, if they want to do special projects, if they have special needs, they come forward to the department and they apply for additional funding. What hasn't been worked out yet, and what council needs to scrutinize in the near future, are the rules and regulations that will govern that process of applying for additional money. I think what we have before us, as I said originally, is not owned by any one stakeholder interest. It's a consensus. It is a good change, and I believe we should go forward today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President. I had mainly pushed my button to be able to answer any questions that were being raised, but I think Councilmember Chick did a good job of explaining what the options are here and why it makes sense to reconsider the amended ordinance as a first reading today. One of the other differences or changes that the ad hoc committee made that I'd like to highlight is the grant program, the change to the grant program. It was modeled after the neighborhood matching grant that exists in the Department of Public Works, but the ad hoc, I believe, felt unanimously, if I recall correctly, that we should not be requiring neighborhood councils to match the city resources, at least not in the beginning. And so that's one of the other changes to the plan and to the ordinance that has to reflect it, that's being taken into consideration today. So I do believe the minor changes that come out of the ad hoc make the policy better, make the program better. And when we stop and think that October 1st is now the new date that applications are still, will begin to be accepted as opposed to July 1st. It gives us plenty of time. 1 week isn't too much to ask for. If we're going to do this, let's do this right. Let's take the first reading on the amended ordinance and support it today.
Thank you. We do have, let me just remind you, I have at least 2 more council members who want to be heard, but we do have one person who's asked to be heard on this item. There has been a hearing held, but just in case anybody wants to give him a chance to speak, remember to do that. Mr. Pacheco is next.
Madam President, colleagues, I do want to support Ms. Chicks and Mr. Padilla's suggestion that we, Mr. Padilla, I should say, suggestion that we have the amended ordinance as a first reading. I believe there's 12 of us here, so with the unanimous vote, it would go into, wouldn't require a second reading. I do believe that the ad hoc committee made a good recommendation of how to deal with all the different issues, and believe that the amendments that would implement those decisions are necessary for today. And I'm not sure if someone's moved those already, but I want to make sure that I'm clear that I support those changes because I think they're a good compromise on how to handle everything in terms of the funding, the equity issues that were raised, and the elimination of the matching aspect. And I will go on record once again with something I said in committee, that come next year, after we start the process of actually accepting applications, that I will be looking towards the department to make sure that there's at least one neighborhood council on the verge of being certified through each area planning commission before we start giving out grants or any sort of funding. That way the whole city's online before money goes out the door. As I've said before, it's very important to me that all of us participate in this program, and therefore I will be monitoring that to make sure it happens. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, just for the record, I'm going to withdraw my motion to continue. I think I see a tidal wave. I can recognize one when I see one. Mr. Holden is next. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Madam President. What does your motion represent? Just don't vote on anything today and continue for...
My motion was to continue simply in order to give the public a chance to comment on the changes that were proposed by the ad hoc.
During the public comment, was anything said by the public that would reflect the necessity to make these changes and the amendments at this time? So obviously, the council decided this is what they want to do, and that's why I'm asking.
Well, the council held a lengthy hearing last week, at which a number of members of the public did speak, and the council adopted a plan that involved a financing plan, but the ad hoc budget committee adopted a different plan for the financing, which is what revises what requires that the ordinance, the old ordinance be received and filed, and the new one comes up as first
I would
reading.
just, my opinion therefore would be that to avoid any appearance conflict, we should acquiesce, go along with the president here. And I tell you why, because this is being voted on by the people. It's something that has been discussed for a number of years, dating back to Mr. Wax and Mr. Thomas, Ms. Chick and others. A short delay for the purpose of requesting a response, which won't mean anything. So how much time are you talking about, Ms. Chick? I mean, Ms.
When I first moved it, I suggested until Friday.
Well,
That makes you and me, Nate. Nobody else supports it at this
now
point.
what about you? You don't want it? Well, you're not going to get it today anyway because somebody's going to withhold. You're going to be sitting
Well,
there
only
shaking
if
your
somebody,
head.
He's telling
only
us
if
who
somebody
will withhold.
withholds, yeah. All right.
Oh, we're going to withhold. So you're just going to sit there anyway until next week. I'm telling you. You're going to withhold, which means you're not going to get it today.
All right, hold on. Mr. Burnson would like to be heard.
Just by way of a suggestion, if it is the intent of the council to adopt, if it is the intent of the council to adopt any of the recommendations of the advisory committee, then I think we could possibly act as first reading on those today, and then have that go over till 1 week, and then if there's any changes, we can always do that. But that would accomplish the same thing. I don't know what the what the pleasure of the council is, however, on these recommendations, so perhaps we can be enlightened on that.
Ms. Chick?
Was it a unanimous vote on ad hoc committee? And how many of you were there? No, 6, am I right? Yeah. Now there's 2 committees, one with 6 members and one with 3 that are unanimously supporting going forward today, Mr. Holden. That's number 1. Number 2, there are some of the very key players in this process here today that are supportive of our going forward. In terms of delaying, we are shortening the period of potential mayoral veto and response on the part of the council, which I know is something that you feel very strongly about, that the council should have the opportunity to always prevail. And in terms of the process and the public participation, I don't know that there's ever been anything that's had more public participation. And since the change we're making today is not a substantive change, it's a change in how the money, how the resources are delivered, but not whether. And if anything, it's increasing the resources and increasing the equitable distribution. So, Mr. Holden, if someone's going to withhold, it's going to be you. And then I will apologize for you to the people that you just directed your comments to, that they're going to have to sit and wait longer. If we have 12 votes on the first reading, it passes today. I would like to make a motion that the plan be amended in accordance to the changes in the ordinance that we will hopefully enact today. I ask for a unanimous vote, colleagues, if possible.
Yes? What's your point?
Well, let me ask Ms. Galanter if this would satisfy the need that you have to have these people be heard.
I withdrew the motion.
Oh, you withdrew it? I'm sorry. I missed that.
That was
I missed
about 5 or 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
Okay, what is before us is to receive and file the first ordinance that appeared on the agenda that we did a first reading last week, and instead to adopt a new ordinance which has the changes made by the ad hoc committee on Friday. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved forthwith on that.
Madam Chair?
There's
Yes,
also
Ms.
item
Weingart,
3A.
Hold on.
I would
Yes.
just ask that, since the ordinance has been changed, that the council make a motion to request staff to amend the plan and bring that back.
Ms. Chick already made that motion. And so we will now vote on that motion to amend the plan okay, so open the roll on Ms. Chick's motion to amend the plan to conform to the ordinance. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is also approved.
Yeah.
Forthwith on that as well. Now, since there are 12 of us here, Mr. Pacheco, you were number 12, let us take up items 7, 8, and 9.
And did you wish to reconsider 1 at the same time?
Yes, and let us also, if there's no objection, we will we will deem item 1 reconsidered, and we have before us items 1, 7, 8, and 9. Any specials? Open the roll on,
Madam
Yes, Mr.
President,
Padilla.
request a one-day continuance on item number 7.
Okay, Mr. Padilla, 7. We did the, oh, what did we do on number 2? We did something.
Item number 2, we received and filed the old ordinance, and we amended, we
And adopted a new
but we only had
amended-
11 members
So
present.
let's reconsider items 1 and 2.
1 and
as-
2.
Okay, so we now have 1 and 2 as modified by Mr. Bernson's motion. Mr. Padilla has requested that item 7 be continued, how long? 1 day. So we have 1, 2, 8, and 9. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Forthwith on item 2.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Hernandez.
with tremendous apologies, I ask that we reconsider item 18. Mr. Deaton had an amendment that's very important that it be part of the
Okay.
reprogramming.
Now, we did do that forthwith, so if
Right.
it's still here, can we take care of that? All right.
Can we withforth it?
We will unforthwith it.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no objection to reconsidering, item 18 is now reconsidered. Mr. Deaton.
And there's 18A before us.
Yeah, 18A, which transfers some money from projects that cannot use the funds to a East Wilmington Senior Citizens facility, which the Board of Commissioners of Rec and Parks will consider tomorrow. The motion is made by Mr. Pacheco, and would recommend approval of 18A and then approval of 18 as amended.
Okay. Okay? Okay, here we go. Open the roll on item 18A. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
That's approved. And now on 18 as amended by 18A. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
All right, that's approved. Now forth.
Now forthwith. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? What else did we miss here? All right, we're now up to, I believe, item 12. Okay, item 12, we have not previously had a public hearing, so we have one person who has asked to be heard, Robert Asile.
Robert Asile for Kellen Properties. Just wanted to point out that the deficiency items have been corrected. The paperwork for the REAP was received after the appeal due date by us, so we were not able to respond promptly. And we've scheduled a final inspection for all the deficient items for next Monday. So we'd like to request an extension or the matter to be held over for another 2 weeks.
Okay. Ms. Chick, this is your district. Where is she? Laura? This is your district the gentleman's talking about.
Yeah, and I had checked with my office to, in the district, we had not heard from the property owner, and so I walked in here preparing to support. What is the request? A 2-week continuance?
Yes.
For the purpose of?
We have final inspection scheduled for next Monday. We tried to do it yesterday, but the inspectors were too busy. All the deficiency items have been corrected.
I'd like to have it a week from Friday.
Okay? Okay?
Great.
All
Slightly
right,
less
so
than 2
this
weeks.
item will be continued until, what is a week from Friday?
A week from Friday would be May 25th.
All right, May 25th, okay? Okay, this item will be continued till May 25th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That closes the public hearing. That takes care of the item. Mr. Hernandez, you wanted to...
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd ask if we could take item 34 out of order. I'll deal with it quickly.
Okay.
Members of council, this is a resolution, and one, I want to comment to Councilmember Fuhr that he was right and I was wrong when we were debating the cornfields, because he said we would be sued, and we were sued. And as a result of that lawsuit, today is Joe Reynolds is here from the National Resource Defense, and we're asking that we support and ask that the state fund the purchase of the cornfields for purposes of a state park. Part of the announcement that I want to make is, one, there has been an agreement with Majestic, as well as all those groups who were fighting for the state park, and today, State Recreation and Parks Director Rusty Arias will be announcing that the budget itself has set aside $40 million for that purchase. And we're going to need all the support of not only all those people fighting for a state park, but the city of Los Angeles to make sure it stays in the state budget. And so, again, my best case scenario we end up with a tremendous state park in that area. And so I just asked for a unanimous vote, and I also wanted to recognize the activities of the community that continues to fight for open space in Los Angeles and park space for our children, and again, ask for the unanimous vote on today's resolution.
Okay. Anybody else? Item 34, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
You got your unanimous vote. That is approved. Congratulations. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Joel. And congratulations to Mike Fuhr for being right when Hernandez was wrong. Treasure the moment when he said that to you. Okay, that's approved. Next item is...
Item number 20.
Item 20. We do have several people who wish to be heard on item 20. We'll start with Steve Fleischle from the Baykeeper, to be followed by Michael Procio, Daniel O., and Samuel Unger. Hi.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Steve Fleischle. I am the executive director of the Santa Monica Baykeeper, an environmental group dedicated to protecting Santa Monica Bay, San Pedro Bay, and adjacent coastal waters, which would include places like the LA River and Ballona Creek. Before I start, I do want to thank Council Member Ridley Thomas for having meetings with us on this issue. It's a very important issue to us, and hopefully to a lot of you. The first chart I wanted to show you is with regard to sewage spills in the Los Angeles area. I don't think anyone on this council can deny that sewage spills are a problem in the city, and as you can see from the chart, which I can't see right now, thank you. In the year 2000, we had 689 sewage spills within the city of LA. That's up from 564 in 1999. And this isn't just a problem for beaches, this is a problem for communities, this is a problem for neighborhoods where these spills occur. Some of them reach receiving water, some of them do not. But grease-related spills are very significant in relation to where they come from. Daniel, can you put up the next chart? Grease blockages contribute to a vast, actually the majority of spills, or close to about 40% of the spills are because of grease blockages in the system. And you can see in the year 2000, there were 289 sewage spills in the city of Los Angeles. A little less than one a day from grease blockages within the system, and that's up from 1999, which is again an increase from 1998. So this is a major problem that this council today has an opportunity to deal with. We've been negotiating with the city staff for several years on this issue, and again, I think today is the opportunity where we can move forward and deal with this in a meaningful way. The Baykeeper has consulted with national experts on this issue. We have also worked with the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Regional Water Quality Control Board to conclude that the city's proposal is not adequate to deal with this problem. Unfortunately, the proposal as put forth by city staff simply deals with a method called BMPs, Best Management Practices, whereby essentially you request that restaurants do such simple things as wipe out pans with paper towels and things like that. And we would submit to you that that's just not feasible. It's just not going to happen. We can't even get people to wash their hands after going to the bathroom. How are we going to get them to wash down all the pans that they have in their restaurant? We seriously doubt that the city's proposal will reduce sewage spills in this area, and we also seriously doubt that the city staff can say with certainty that this program will result in measurable reductions in sewage spills. Meanwhile, our proposal, which would be to require interceptors with limited exceptions for grease traps in areas where there is financial hardship or where there are space difficulties for interceptors, that approach will reduce sewage spills. We have seen cities around the country utilize this type of approach with grease interceptors. Based on this chart here, you can see some of them, grease removal devices at greater than 90% of the food service establishments in places like Atlanta, Fort Worth, Houston, New York City. All of these cities have implemented programs more along the lines of what we are proposing, what the Environmental Protection Agency is proposing, and what the Regional Water Board is proposing. We are unaware of any programs around the country that are designed like the City of LA's program or proposed program, and again, we don't think it will be effective. In terms of the interceptor approach, it has proven effective in other places. The City of San Diego is one example where it has proven effective. You can see on here where they implemented the grease interceptor program, started in about 1990, 1991. You can see significant reductions as they have enforced that program and moved forward with the program to a place where they have about 50% reduction in sewage spills because of that program. Some people have raised the issue of costs on our proposal, but we think if you amortize the costs, it's not going to be a significant burden. And ironically enough, the Baykeeper is proposing a financial hardship provision for restaurants, one that is not included in the city staff's proposal. And we think that will significantly help folks that can't do this, and they could put in a grease trap instead. I guess lastly, I'd just like to say that again, we have an opportunity here today. We have been negotiating with the city for quite some time. If the city decides to approve a BMP-based approach, unfortunately, those opportunities to continue negotiations will be cut off. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Michael Prosio.
Thank you. My name is Mike Prosio. I'm with the California Restaurant Association, the Government Affairs Office. We are a statewide organization representing approximately 16,000 restaurants throughout the state, half of whom are in the greater Los Angeles area. Before I get started on our position on this ordinance, I'd like to thank the Bureau of Sanitation for their efforts and their work on this. They have conducted a painstaking stakeholders process. They have solicited comment from industry on this, and they have done a good job to try to listen to that comment and within the bounds of their regulatory obligations to listen to those comments and try to put a feasible program together. And I think in large part that's what they have done in the proposal that is before you now. We do support in concept the Bureau's proposal for fog discharges. I say in concept because we do have concerns relative to the permitting requirements that are associated with the proposal. There would be an annual charge, an initial application charge and an annual renewal permit charge associated with this proposal of a few $100s, and at a time when obviously energy is a concern, perhaps not as big of a concern for some of the folks here as in other parts of the state, but other business costs are continually increasing and we're heading into a time of economic slowdown. We're extremely concerned relative to any additional cost burdens that are placed upon restaurants, and we would ask that within supporting this particular provision, this proposal, that has been put before you, that the council seek other means to absorb the costs necessary to implement the proposal and initially as well as over time. That being said, we do wholly support the idea and the concept that the Bureau of Sanitation has put forth. The importance of this issue is not lost on the restaurant industry. That's why we've been working hard with the Bureau for quite some time on this, a matter of well over a year now, to craft a proposal that we think is reasonable, cost-effective, and that will truly be efficient. A lot of the proposals that were mentioned just before I came up and that have been discussed, the data is inconclusive at best relative to their effectiveness at reducing the number of spills. And we support the Los Angeles proposal because it is groundbreaking to a certain extent, and there's a few key points that are worth considering. The Los Angeles proposal, unlike proposals in other cities, does require every facility to step up to the plate and take appropriate measures to limit the amount of fog discharge from their facility. That is generally going to be done in this program through best management practices. But again, every facility must demonstrate an ability to limit that discharge. If they do not appropriately do so, then the Bureau will step in and will place upon them a requirement to install a more expensive grease interceptor device. What is important there, it was mentioned earlier that it's not feasible to think that restaurants are going to implement best management practices such as simply wiping down pots and pans with a paper towel. I would submit it's quite less feasible than that to think that small restaurants are going to purchase and install grease interceptors, the purchase and installation of which can run anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. And the small business cost exemption provided in the alternate proposal notwithstanding, that would only exclude approximately 70% of the facilities in the city, in this jurisdiction. So you're still talking about a large number of facilities and of small, independently operated facilities that would be imposed with this very significant cost. The county proposal is easy to implement. It can produce almost overnight results through BMPs. It's worth considering because it does not place unfair and unharsh expenses upon restaurants that are doing a good job now of controlling fog discharge from their facilities. There's no reason to arbitrarily require a facility to install a $50,000 grease interceptor if they can control their grease charge through BMPs. Give the restaurants a chance to prove that they can do this in other means, and if they can't step up to the plate, then at that time allow the Bureau to step up and impose the necessary requirements upon them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O. Daniel O. No, it's not your turn yet. Mr. Unger, Samuel Unger.
Good morning, Madam President. My name is Samuel Unger. I'm a Water Resources Control Engineer.
If you pick the mic up a little, we'll be able to hear you better. Go
Thank you.
ahead. Thank you.
With the California Regional Water Quality Control Board in Los Angeles. On February 6, 2001 and May 2, 2001, the U.S. EPA and the Regional Board submitted correspondence to the city's Bureau of Sanitation and Councilmember Ridley Thomas concerning the proposed fog control program before you today. I'm here simply really to enter these documents into the record and hope that you consider them. In brief, the EPA and Regional Board recommend the program that is based on more intensive utilization of grease removal devices and less reliance on conditional waivers. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. That, Mr. O, not here. Okay, that closes the public hearing. Mr. Fewer. Mr. Fewer, now it's your turn.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd actually like to ask Ms. Wilson and others who are experts on the Sewage Management Construction Fund to come forward.
Mr. Ridley
I'd like
Thomas,
to defer to our colleague, Mr. Ridley Thomas, who is the esteemed chair of the committee.
Yeah, he didn't push his button, though, until after you were talking.
But
Go
I
ahead.
pushed his, I think. So
Obviously so. Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Figuratively speaking, you most certainly did. Thank you very much. Madam President, members of the council, Madam President, you may recall that we heard this matter in EQ, Committee, Environmental Quality and Waste Management, and we did so on more than one occasion. I want to acknowledge the work of Steve Flashley and the Baykeepers for offering their perspective, their critique, and as he did indicate, I convened a meeting to further refine their input and listened carefully to the input of the department about this. In the final analysis, I think our decision has to be a prudent and defensible one that does at least two things. First, moves in the direction of cleaning up the environment, and more specific than that, making sure that we unclog these sewers and all of the attendant problems that we know that are caused by that. And we should do that in a way that imposes the least amount of hardship to the extent that that is possible. For those who are not in compliance and given the opportunity to comply and they still fail to do so, they then ought to be dealt with by way of the appropriate sanctions, penalties, and/or fines. That essentially is the approach that I think needs to be taken. That is an aggressive, that is to say proactive education program, and the appropriate consequences should follow. Madam President, members of the council, the question of how we treat the businesses who are directly impacted by this strikes me as being very important. We want to build the appropriate level of consensus, get the environment appropriately cleaned up, and make sure that the residents of our respective communities are properly served. Toward that end, I want to move the report of ORS for our consideration, and then if there are other matters for us to discuss, I think we can do so at that time.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Fewer, did you want to comment, or did you want the staff to do a presentation? What?
I have a couple questions, but
All right, well, why don't we go to your
Judy.
questions and see what happens here?
Okay. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas, for leading the discussion. But I'm going to need Ms. Wilson in just a second. Okay. I concur with the theme that Mr. Ridley Thomas has articulated, which is we need to be taking real steps now to curtail these discharges, which we know are directly related to grease. But this requires a little bit of detail. I'm trying to figure some things out here. The opponents today have said, please include in this a requirement that restaurants install these grease traps and create a hardship exemption. Now, I don't have their recommendation in writing in front of me. The concept of making this ordinance doable for restaurants is very important. I agree with that, and the consensus point that Mark raised, I think, is a critical one. But what if, for example, what would be the consequences in terms of grease output of adopting the opponent's recommendation to include a hardship requirement, a hardship exemption, but the requirement that everybody install the grease traps?
Okay, let me answer that in two different ways, if I could. Judy Wilson, Director of Sanitation. First of all, grease traps versus interceptors. We need to make sure everybody understands the difference.
Thank you.
Interceptors are below ground, generally located outside the restaurant itself, and they cost between $20,000 to $50,000. Grease traps are generally installed underneath the sink. You can install them for about $1,200. They need to be emptied 2 or 3 times a day, whereas an interceptor is pumped out a couple of times a year. The Department of Health, we've talked with a lot of different people, including the county health department, and they do not like grease traps. They feel that the maintenance on them is difficult, and they attract vectors, particularly in this climate, roaches, rats, etc.
Okay.
So they're strongly opposed to grease traps. In terms of affordability, we did some analysis looking at data that was provided to us confidentially, which we cannot share, but within our internal tax revenue department here in the city of Los Angeles, to look at gross receipts and how much people were paying. And we determined, based upon that information, about 77% of the restaurants in the city of Los Angeles would meet the requirement for an exemption.
77%?
77%.
So only 23% would actually have to
have an
install the
interceptor.
interceptors under the opponent's proposal.
Right.
Now, what if, rather than coming here with a firmly set view, I really want to have my view formed by your answers here. So if we had that exemption, we'd only be talking about 23% of the restaurants in the city. That's the universe that's at stake on the question, do we require interceptors to be installed or not? Now, of that 23%, the cost is $20,000, give or take, correct?
20 to 50, depending upon the plumbing characteristics.
What I was wondering is, in the sewer construction and maintenance fund, could we create some kind of a revolving fund, either to defray interest costs or as a grant program into which restaurants in that top 23% could dip, so that we would combine approaches? We would say, we do the other things that are involved here, which everybody agrees about. We require interceptor installation. 77% don't have that requirement because it would put them out of business, presumably, or be a real hardship. For the other 23, we have a revolving fund into which they can dip to make the payments, and perhaps, as I say, either interest-wise or as a grant. What about that?
I looked into that.
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah.
What was the
And
result of that analysis?
Well, both the state revolving loan fund was one area we looked into, plus our own SEM fund, and we were told that we cannot use public funds to make permanent improvements on private property. That's just not legally available to us. We did
Whose
look
view
into
was
that. We both looked at, State Revolving Loan Fund, we asked them the question if we could apply for money through them. And their answer was it would not be a viable option because you are using the money to make improvements on private property. It's not an eligible use.
But the city has often been involved, indeed the federal government has been involved, after the earthquake. Tons of money was made available in grants as well as loans to private homeowners to make improvements on their property.
I think that was a FEMA issue rather than State Revolving Loan Fund. That there are very strict
What
requirements.
about our sewer maintenance and construction fund, or whatever it's called?
I wish our city attorney, Chris Westhoff, had come down. We had Chris Westhoff investigate this also, and he said that the SEM funds cannot be used for improvements on private property.
All right, because I would love to have that discussion with them, and I don't want to unduly attenuate this, because one reason I know that the chair of the committee wants to move this forward is that we're under the gun. In fact, there's litigation relating to sewage spills, and the sewage spills are tied to this issue, and we have to act reasonably quickly, and we should definitely act while this council, which understands this issue, is in place. I agree with all that. But it isn't clear to me, at least from the presentation so far, that there are stones we haven't turned over yet to create a win from everybody's standpoint.
There's
Okay,
one
my-
stone,
Time
I'm
to
sorry,
finish
there's one more
it, yeah.
part of your question I wanted to suggest. Rather than city funds, there may be an opportunity to work with the Community Development Bank and go to them to see if we could get some low-interest loans and the Small Business Administration to help.
Okay, wait. It's Mr. Hernandez's turn now.
Now, for interceptors to be put on a new construction, that's not as heavy an expense, is that correct?
That's right. Generally, you're already in the street, you're doing all sorts of work, so it doesn't seem to be as onerous.
Now, when interceptors are put in, do they only impact, is it only for one restaurant? Can they be put in such a way if you had a row of restaurants that could work with them?
It could be possible, but in most instances, probably not. It depends. If you had like a restaurant row with a large number of restaurants, for example, in Universal City,
Well, I was thinking of
at
Chinatown.
well, that's maybe possible. I don't really know. You'd have to have the engineering department look at the specifics of their own plumbing.
And if we're doing some sewer work in that same corridor, it would help if that was coordinated.
Yeah, it would.
Now, the reason I'm asking these questions is Mr. Fuhr, I think, was headed in the right direction, but we as a city have voted to, for example, provide incentives in enterprise zones and empowerment zones, water and power reductions. We're currently dealing with a business tax reform measure that will be creating an amnesty and create certain other types of things. We also have site-specific increment programs where we use tax increments to subsidize projects. And I'm wondering if in the restaurant field, if maybe we shouldn't have a study that would share with us how we could provide an incentive for these interceptors to be placed and then offset that cost, looking at some of the other taxes they pay. Some of the other fees that we're charging them as a city, where over a period of time, they could recoup that cost and create an incentive system. Has that been looked at?
No, it's not.
Again, I think that we could create this field because on the one hand, to require it on a business at this point, and again, some small restaurants, and it's really everybody together that creates the problem. It's not 23% of the 70 and 77% who don't. But maybe we should look at creating an incentive program that would offset some of the fees that are being paid to the city, offset some of the costs that are being paid in terms of administrative costs, in terms of taxes. And I don't know how we initiate that kind of a proposal, but I think that that could be a real strong incentive program for restaurants and not impact their economic development. It might have some impact on the city funds, but ultimately I think it would be cost savings to all parties involved if we could look at it in that fashion. But, you know, they could save their fees over a period of 10 years to offset the cost, and that would come out to about $2,000 a year.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Mr. Hernandez.
Madam President, members of the council, Mr. Fuhr's line of inquiry is certainly appropriate, particularly as it relates to attempting to address the problem, which should not be taken lightly by anyone, nor do I think such is the case. And at the same time, those who would be thought as violators, for the lack of a better way of expressing it, those who are simply not in compliance, to try to make this as easy for them to comply as possible. It seems to me that is the objective that you seek. The proposal made by the Bureau and recommended ultimately by ORS does that as best as possible for the information that we have at our disposal at this point, Mr. Fuhr and members of the council. And it is with that in mind that we try to avoid, and I trust that the restaurant industry appreciates this, we try to avoid a straight-out imposition of interceptors, which would cost anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 per installation, which would, as you well appreciate, have a very, very negative impact on small restaurants and the like. And yet this does require those newly built new constructions to comply with state-of-the-art features so as to protect the environment, particularly to prevent fats, oils, and greases of various sorts from polluting the streams and the like that we are concerned to protect. I don't know that we have ultimately arrived at a final solution. I am persuaded, though, that we have a respectable proposal before us so that we can move the process along. I don't feel like we are locking into something that cannot be improved, that is to say revised or substantially modified, should that be deemed appropriate. And to the extent that in a specific period of time that we would review this for evaluation, and Ms. Wilson, if you could give indication what the evaluation components look like, so that we can make the determination as to whether this is an effective best management practices program, and if not, it would seem to me that we would be obliged to step up our efforts. What's the time frame for evaluation, Ms. Wilson?
We will have our first group, hopefully in July. We'll come before you and ask for resolution authorities to begin implementation of the program. We have 10,000 restaurants.
Yes.
And we're planning to get to 2,000 of them a year. And we basically had a form of triage where we identified what we believe to be the worst offenders, or those
Yes.
restaurants that are in closest proximity to grease spills and heavy maintenance. Those are among the first we'll get out to, the first 1,700 that we have so-called tagged, being within 1,500 linear feet downstream of a grease spill. So it will take us 12 months to get out to them, and I'd say probably another 6 to 12 months to see how those first that group are doing. So we can continue to report quarterly and what our experiences are.
I think, Madam President, in conclusion, we should make it clear that the council through the committee would expect quarterly reports. After the first year, we would want a summary report that would essentially give us some indication as to whether or not we feel the program to be working. And if it is, we proceed with the furtherance of it. If not, at that time, I think we should revisit the entirety of it with an eye toward stricter compliance, and I would so move.
All right, thank you. I assume, Mr. Ridley Thomas, that the suggestions of both Mr. Fuhr and Mr. Hernandez would be also subject to the committee's
They are accepted.
purview. Okay, Mr. Fuhr.
Yeah, Madam President, I actually wanted to build on the comment that you just made a little bit, because, again, there is a lot of consensus. Among the consensus points is that everything else that's before us is a good idea. The question is not whether these are good or not, but whether they're adequate to the task. And indeed, given where consensus is, the only discrepancy between where the city is and where those who've testified in opposition to the ordinance today is with regard to that 23% of the larger and I guess more profitable restaurants in the city. I understand Mr. Lee Thomas's point that moving forward is a good idea. And I think that I'd like to amend that suggestion a little bit. Mr. Hernandez proposes that we look carefully at combinations of tax incentives and other kinds of positive incentives the city can offer. He also discusses the importance of our Public Works Department coordinating with our commercial districts so that when the street is being opened up, the placement of an interceptor happens that might actually draw on a number of restaurants in the community. Even if there is not a pending public works project, it might be cost effective in some cases for the city to make the installation anyway for a variety of purposes in a community. I also added to that the discussion about whether there might be a source of funds available for both defraying interest and loan expenses and for grants in the city. Mr. Westhoff isn't here to comment on that. I think that combination of very specific proposals, of general proposals, needs to be made much more specific. And I would ask, Madam President, colleagues, if we could amend that which moves forward today to require that there be a presentation, and it might be before either Public Works, EQ, or for that matter, Community Economic Development, because each of the committees is implicated by this, soon, in a couple of weeks, regarding how we can concretize some of those ideas that are before us to supplement, not supplant what's here, so we can move the item forward, get those quarterly reports anyway, but also explore with real particularity the ideas that have been put on the table in general terms today, because I think that there's a lot of merit to a number of the comments that have been made, and we will be missing an opportunity. But we shouldn't, as Mr. Lee Thomas advocates, miss the opportunity to move forward on the consensus items now. Let's not slow this down, but let's supplement it with a further conversation that must come to committee while this council is still serving the next couple of weeks.
Madam President,
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
if I may, that Mr. Fuhr just say that in addition to fats, oil, and grease, he wants to add concrete into the sewer system. What is that? You said you want to...
Should really
yeah,
stop
right.
it up.
I assure you, if you concretize it, that's precisely that what will happen. Mr. Fuhr, be assured that the following is the case. This matter will continue to be reviewed in committee for a couple of reasons. There is an active discussion going on between the City of Los Angeles and Santa Monica Baykeepers. And somewhere the EPA factors into that as well. There's a reason that Mr. Chris Westhoff is in the middle of it. It reduces itself to matters involving litigation, and so be absolutely confident that this does not conclude the discussion. There is ongoing work to be done in this particular area, and I suspect that we will necessarily revisit it. The record will reflect that a number of members have expressed concern about this matter, and toward that end, we will fold those items into the discussion and proceed accordingly. Madam President, with your permission, I move the previous question.
All right, let me just remind you that Mr. Fuhr's last motion was to ask, Mark, Mr. Fuhr's last suggestion was to ask that sanitation come and do a presentation before your committee and possibly Public Works and Economic Development before the end of June.
I see.
Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Mr. Fuhr.
Okay. Mr. Burnson, Mr. Ridley Thomas just moved the previous question.
I know,
Do
but
you
he
wanna do
was out
this?
of order in moving it.
Okay, go ahead. Mr. Burnson.
I just want to ask a couple of questions. Are we going to take an action on this today, or is this going to be referred to committee? And what is that? The action will be to
It comes back.
adopt it, and this will affect a number of restaurants. Is that correct?
Ordinance to be drafted and come back, Mr. Burnson.
An ordinance will come back?
Yeah.
So in other words, this action is not final today. Is that correct, or what?
No, we have to adopt the ordinance.
This directs
Well,
what goes
let me
into
ask-
the ordinance.
It
What-
goes to the
what-
city
what effect-
attorney's office for drafting the ordinance, which will then come back to you for 2 readings.
Well, I'm just curious, because I'm as concerned as anybody about what we do as far as the bay is concerned and our other environmental things, but I'm also concerned about what it does to our business community. Now, what is the impact of this going to be? Has anybody really given any thought to this or given any estimate on figures? How many restaurants is going to put out of business? What's going to happen?
That's why we suggested best management practices as the first alternative before requiring a costly interceptor that may not be needed. Our effort here is to try and be business-friendly but still be environmentally responsible.
Well, how expensive is the business-friendly going to be?
Tracy, do you want to talk about the fees?
Tracy Minimini, Bureau of Sanitation Industrial Waste Management Division. Our estimates for implementation of best management practices are roughly $360 per year, and that cost is to haul off waste grease that instead of being dumped down the sewer is set aside and picked up by haulers that
So it's
dispose of it.
approximately only $360 a year?
Very rough estimate, yes.
And will that
Plus,
apply?
yes,
What?
excuse me, there are also fees associated with the industrial wastewater permit that will be necessary.
And what does that cost?
$356, a one-time permit application fee, and an annual fee of $244. This is part of our existing fee
So
structure.
we're up to $1,000 a year practically, and we've got a lot of small restaurants are going to be impacted by this, is that correct?
Keep in mind that that $356 is just a one-time fee.
Yeah, but then you've got a $250 a year fee besides, permit
Correct.
fee, so you're up to
Correct.
$700 then, or $600 then, and then the installation, you're up to $1,000.
Well, our program does not require installation of equipment. It's focusing on the best management practices.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote? What we are voting on, if I'm not mistaken, is the item as listed in the agenda with the additional suggestions that were made by Mr. Fewer and Mr. Hernandez, including a presentation by sanitation to go and ORS and whoever else, to be held subsequent to our adopting this. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes, 1 no.
All right, that's approved. And the ordinance will come back when the city attorney gets it drafted.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item.
Brings you to item number 30, called special by Councilmember Hernandez.
All right.
It's associated with item 36.
Yes, I'm sorry, item 30. I do not have a card on that. Item 30, Mr. Hernandez.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair, I think we were just asking that item 30 be received and filed because item 36 will be the closed session item.
All right, and the only question is whether you wanted to wait to do that until after we have done the closed session. No? Okay.
We're going to have the closed session today. It's not going to be postponed or anything.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Okay, so in that case, the motion is to receive and file item 30. Okay, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is received and filed. I believe that brings us to 33.
Item 33, correct.
All right, we do have somebody who wishes to be heard on item 33, and we also have, do we have two motions on this one? Lord, look at all that. Okay, Mort Allen, are you still here? He left? Okay, Mr. Allen is not here. The public hearing is closed. You don't need this, actually. He's not here. Item 33 is now before us. Ms. Mizikowski.
Members of the council, a week or two ago, we acted on an urgency matter brought to us by the city ethics office regarding one of the most basic issues in facing campaign finance today, and that's the issue of disclosure. We saw most recently in our own election this last cycle that there were, by way of state law amendments, allowances for independent expenditures of quite a significant magnitude. And the problem is, though some knew what those expenditures were, a whole lot of others were not aware. So our ordinance about 2 weeks ago said there shall be disclosure now, there shall be disclosure about where those independent expenditures came from. We shall treat them, at least in the disclosure realm, just as we do our own finance laws. There was an issue that I thought needed to be addressed, but in fairness of not causing that last ordinance to be slowed down in any way, I brought in this motion separately. And there is one area where I don't think we've accomplished the disclosure that we ought to, and that is required correspondingly for every other kind of campaign advertising. If you do campaign advertising on the radio, on the TV, or even in mailings, there is a requirement at the state law, and it corresponds to the city, that on that advertising, on the airwaves, on the media, and on mailing, you have to disclose in that piece of information itself where it's coming from. Is it coming from the campaign to elect so-and-so, or is it coming from some other independent expenditure? We've all seen them, we're all aware of it, it's required. The one area that is not, there's a loophole, that it is not now required is billboards. Billboards do not say where they are coming from. And they are as much a control area like the Federal Communications Commission does control things at the state and federal level, where when that is going over the airwaves, it says on that commercial who it's coming from. I believe that this motion requires the same thing, that just says for billboards that are out there, when they are used, they shall follow the same disclosure on the billboard itself where that payment is coming from. I have talked to the City Ethics Commission and the City Attorney. They concur that this is important and should have been part of their earlier ordinance. And I'm going to move that actually we put this over one day so that in consultation with the City Attorney and the Ethics Commission, we can have an ordinance on the desk tomorrow for adoption to close this one loophole on disclosure. And it's interesting, members of the council, Morton Allen, who was here, has worked on behalf of one of the media interests who does control billboards, and they concur, and they've actually done it on their billboards. They believe it is appropriate, they believe it is consistent with all other rules, and they are complying voluntarily. I think this is something that does have an urgency need, and I would like to ask, as I say, the City Attorney to talk about it, and then ask that we adopt this and put it over one day so the ordinance can come back.
Okay, Mr. Pacheco wants to be heard. Do you want to wait until the City Attorney does his thing?
I just had a question. I think he'd probably, the city attorney, sorry, I didn't mean to say he, would probably be in the best position. In order for this to make sense, I would think that we would need something that was enforceable in terms of readability. I know under state law, there's a certain standard that they use for readability in terms of the mailings and any sort of written communication. And I guess this would be akin to a written communication. Is there a way we can transfer that model to this so that we have an enforceable guide? Because I want to make sure it's enforceable because I don't want it to fall on because of vagueness. Is there a way we can do that, Mr. Alpern?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Has industry or anyone recommended? I know for the regular mailings, it's a 6-point or 8-point is the minimum. You have to notify.
Well, when you're talking about 6-point and 8-point type, you're talking about something which is a piece of paper.
Right. So I want to do a comparable. Yeah, I want to do comparable.
We've had staff recommend to us that the requirements say that the identification shall occupy no less than 3% of the overall advertising space on the sign.
Okay, Tony, did you want to say anything additional, or we might be ready to vote? Oh, no, we're not ready to vote.
If there are questions, we're happy to answer the questions. We have been working with the council member's office on this. We do have an ordinance that's almost ready.
I see.
From what we heard today, there are a few minor changes that we would want to make.
There may be more coming. I have now 2 more
and bring
council
it back tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Mr. Holden.
You were saying that the identification indicating who's paying for that spot or ad shall not represent any less than 2 or 2.5%?
It was 3% of the overall advertising space on the sign.
That's a lot. I mean, that's a big portion. Now, when you look at the piece of literature that we send out, we just specify what the points are, and it's not anything close to 2 or 3%. And that's why they specify points in terms of letter type. And I think we have to be more specific, and if you're going to have a comparison or make it relatively proportional.
Hard for Mr. Alpern to hear what you just said. Let me just.
I think you should go for some kind of proportionality constant here. But 3% doesn't, on a piece of literature, does not have 3% when you identify who paid for it.
Yeah,
And then you're in compliance.
Mr. Holden, you're right. It's not 3%. The size of the type or the percentage of the sign depends upon a question of readability. When you're talking about an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, 6-point type or 8-point type is something that the industry believes is readable. My understanding is, from what staff just whispered in my ear, that the 3% is based upon what the industry believes is something that's readable.
Which industry? The campaign consultants or the billboards?
The sign industry.
Okay.
Specifically with respect to super graphic signs. The difference between a super graphic sign and other signs has to do with the manner in which the message is displayed. But if something is readable at 3%, for that kind of a sign, it should be readable for other signs. So basically, we're getting this from the industry.
I'd like to support the concept, but how it's going to be applied based on this discussion. I'd like to see what it looks like. 3%, lay it out. Just bring in maybe just an example at the bottom and roll it up and let us see what it looks like. See if it's readable. If it's not, maybe 3% is not the size that it should be. Maybe it should be larger. I don't know. But I'd like to see what it looks like in proportion. You don't need a whole billboard. You just need, 3 feet rolled out. And if you can put it over until tomorrow anyway, I mean,
Well, I'm going to suggest that Friday might work better. Tomorrow, I have to be in Sacramento. Mr. Bernson's not here, and somebody else is leaving at 11, though you might be able to get it done if you do it before 11. Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez?
This go into effect?
It would become since this ordinance would only apply to the current election, it would go into effect upon publication.
And why is it being proposed only to apply to this election?
I think you should ask the maker of the motion as to why that's...
Why not make it a permanent thing?
If the council instructed us, we could certainly give you an ordinance that did that as well.
Well, if you want my vote, I'd like to make that instruction. Yeah.
Let me hold your time here. I think Cindy's going to give you the same answer. The way to do this, to make it apply across the board, is to do 2 ordinances. The reason to do one that applies just to this election is to get it in effect right away. To do the permanent one, which we could do concurrently, but it would probably be a separate ordinance, there's more elaborate requirements it has to go through before it takes effect.
And again, I'm going back to this disclosure stuff and my frustration, because the candidates who are... Well, my problem with it is every billboard has the name of the firm on it that advertises the billboard. I can tell an Allard board, I can tell a Regency board, and those are the 2 billboard companies that have made contributions to this campaign. In one case, the billboard was advertising a candidate for city attorney. Another case, the billboard is advertising a candidate for mayor. Now, what's frustrating to me is we're talking only about this election, and if you want to talk full disclosure, you would talk about the fact that the city attorney candidate, one of the people who would like to see this happen, happens to be a city councilman introducing the motion. That's full disclosure. At the same time, the people working on the ordinance happen to be the city attorney's office, who is currently running for mayor. And see, that's what it's always bothersome to me in terms of these process. What? I know it's not your motion, Mr. Fuhrer, but you're going to vote on it. And that's part of full disclosure in a process, and it's part of the frustration when we talk about this election. I'm just trying to explain it because some things happened in this election, and that's why some people are reacting to it the way they are. And I just think it's frustrating to put me in a position to ask me to vote for it when the bottom line is it's right now something unique of what's going on in this election. It's an issue on this election, and we're being asked to take a position. I just honestly believe that it has to go across the board. It should be something that's part of all elections if you're going to pass it. No, there's two ordinances before us.
No, there's only one. Oh, no, there's actually none. There is none. There is a motion before us with the city attorney having worked on a draft ordinance, and the suggestion was that we put it over till tomorrow so that the ordinance could be brought forward as the city attorney has looked at and discussed. So there's only one. At this point,
I will support the motion to bring it forward till after our closed session item on the billboard ordinance. And it's because the billboard company in question on that law case is also one of the contributors to this issue. So it's frustrating to me again. I think we're in the midst of a lot of conflicts here, folks.
Ms. Mizikowski.
First of all, to respond to Mr. Holden's concern about really seeing the proportionality, I'm sorry that Mort Allen left because he, in fact, did have one of the type of billboards that are out there showing and concurring that this disclosure could be put on it. And although he didn't have it rolled out at the 80-foot size billboard, he did have it on a proportional sense with the billboard. So I'm sure if we are looking to continue this, we can have that brought back tomorrow. In fact, he had it here today. So there's not a problem in proportionality, at least from the billboard industry, one of the two companies that's out there. The issue of why there aren't two at this point, I was very happy to have brought in two, the one for this ordinance, one for this election, and then beyond. But the ethics office said, could they have more time to look at, rather than just rushing to do something for a permanent disclosure, that they might have some other ideas and some other thoughts. We could do two ordinances, one for this election and one for the future, and then have ethics look at it again to see whether or not it should be amended, fine-tuned, or dealt with in another manner for all future elections. But members of the council, however someone might consider there to be a conflict, in a political world there may always be conflicts. All that we are talking about here is disclosure. And I think to question conflict when disclosure is the essence of what we're talking about, no matter who or where it comes from or who or how it might affect, disclosure is probably the most important thing we can provide, and it's sort of it runs through every kind of electoral process that we've had. And in reacting to what used to happen in days of old, when people didn't know, people couldn't find out, there were all sorts of ways of hiding campaign money. That's all this is talking about. It's talked about being in a sense in a size type that is large enough so that it can be read as people are driving at a speed that hopefully is not too distracting. But I think that there should be no question about this. The Ethics Ordinance, the Ethics Commission wants to move forward with this as a requirement, said that it had just been overlooked in the last ordinance that they brought forward. And I would ask that we bring the ordinance forward as the city attorney can draft. If the council's will is to bring in two different ones, one for the current election and one for the future, I have no problem with that as well.
Okay, so you want to continue this now. Now let's make a decision about when to continue it to. If you want to do it till tomorrow and see if, just make sure that we try to do it before 11 because we won't have enough members after that. Yeah, you'll have to take it out of order. All right, so we're going to continue this until tomorrow with the ordinance to come in at the same time. Are you, all right. Okay.
I don't believe you'll have 12 members tomorrow at any time.
Oh.
You have 2 vacancies and 2 excuses, then 1 person leaving early.
So that'll keep us at 10. Do we have 12 on Friday?
You do have 12 on Friday until 11:30.
So if we did it on Friday out of order, and if everybody showed up close to on time and kept the presentations under control, we could get it done on Friday. Well, we can at least have a vote on it. Yes, it's certainly true that but it's always going to be an issue of whether everybody votes for it or not. We can't vote on it now because we don't have the ordinance before us. All right, so we're going to continue this to Friday. Okay. Thank you all. Next item. Thank you, Tony.
Not on the agenda is Special 1, It is a motion brought in by Councilmember Galanter, and findings need to be made by the city attorney.
Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This involves a wireless telecommunications facility at 143 Culver Boulevard. There was a long process during which the zoning administrator took this under consideration in August of 2000 and in February of 2001. He granted it on May 2nd. The Area Planning Commission approved it. However, the residents claim that they have had no input on or review of the changes before the APC acted, and therefore the council would need to make the findings that the need to act arose after the posting of the agenda and the and there's an immediate need to act. Also, the next motion would be to take jurisdiction under Charter Section 245.
The first motion is on the findings. Open the roll on the findings, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
All right, we have now adopted the findings, which brings us then to the issue of whether to assert jurisdiction. And members of the council, I would ask your support on this. This is one where I think we have an opportunity to actually help the neighborhood get some resolution here. Open the roll on asserting jurisdiction. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
All right, jurisdiction having been, thank you, jurisdiction having been adopted, we'll turn, yes, the motion actually requests that this go to the Planning and Land Use Committee, so.
So you're going to refer this to Planning and
We'll
Land
refer
Use?
it to Planning and Land Use.
And it'll be back to the council within 21 days?
I certainly hope so. I'm sure it will. Okay, next is,
You have specials, you have closed session item 32A and 36, so now is the time for public comment.
yes, I think we're at public comment. This is the time for comments from members of the public on items within the council's purview, but not on today's agenda. And we have just one card, Mr. Jim McQuiston.
Members of the council, Jim McQuiston from the East Hollywood Community Association. We've been really bombed by the notification requirements. We have put in statutory notifications under Section 54954.1 of the California Government Code that we wanted to be notified on specific items. And we turned these into the city clerk and they were stamped in, and we have those copies. But we have never been notified on these. Now, 54954.1 says not only are we supposed to be notified, but we also said we want to get the accompanying documents. And 54954.1 says they have to be transmitted at the time that they're transmitted to everyone else in the respective council or boards. And we're seemingly impotent because we're not getting these things out. One of the things that was on the council this morning, for example, we had a notification, statutory notification. We did not get notified even May 8th or May 15th on this, and we didn't get any of the supporting documents. And we're very concerned about this because if neighborhood councils are going to do their work, they certainly have to get these out. And we think that it's a failure of the system. We don't think it's intentional, but we think that the city council must address this immediately and get this solved, or else we'll have to take other measures to get these materials.
Okay, thank you. That closes the public comment period, and we're now going to adjourn to executive session for 2 items, and while we're doing that, we're going to do housekeeping.
Motions for posting and referral.
Without objection, they are posted and referred.
Requests from council members from attendance at council. Councilmember Chick requests to be excused on Wednesday, May 16th to leave at 11:30 for city business. A motion is required.
All right, Mr. Wax moves, unanimous vote.
Councilmember Galander requests to be excused on Wednesday, May 16th for city business. The motion is required.
Okay, let's see. Mr. Burnson moves, unanimous vote.
Councilmember Chick requests to be excused on Wednesday, June 6th for city business. A motion is required.
Okay, Ms. Mizikowski moves, unanimous vote.
And Councilmember Pacheco requests to be excused on Monday, May 24th, which is a Thursday, if the special council meeting is on that date, to arrive late for city business.
Okay, that probably meets policy, doesn't it?
It meets policy.
Okay.
The desk is clear, except for closed session items.
Okay, well, the room doesn't look like it's clearing very quickly. Soon as the room is clear, we will be in executive session. If you are not part of the executive session, have a nice day. Okay, adjourning motions. Mr. Burnson.
Actually did this the other day, but I didn't have the name of the young man who was hit by an SUV. This was the young son who was hit by a SUV over in the Chatsworth area, and the paramedics anguished. The victim was his own son. And anyway, I'd like to ask that we adjourn in his memory, and the name is Luke Gaines, and he's survived by his mother, Molly, father, Mark, and 4 siblings.
Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President. Request that we adjourn in memory of Lonnie Thomas Duncan, Jr., a native Angelino who was born in April 13th, 1931. Raised in Los Angeles, attended LAUSD schools, graduated from LA Polytechnic High School, and went on to serve in the United States Army during the Korean conflict. He met and married Alicia Broaddus in 1957. Together they had 7 children, 2 of which preceded him in death. He was baptized under the pastorate at Calvary Baptist Church in Pacoima, and certainly enjoyed fishing, being with his family, and cooking for the family.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Madam President, members of the council, would you join me in adjourning in memory of Maria Lucia Romero, who, along with her husband, Joe, were instrumental in the success of the South Los Angeles Martin Luther King Little League. They volunteered countless hours and made a difference. Maria Lucia is survived by her husband, Joe, and her children, Juan, Cynthia, Nancy, and Joe. I would also respectfully request that we adjourn in memory of L.C. Wells, Sr., who was a resident of the 8th Council District for over 45 years. He retired from Rockwell International and was a member of the Crenshaw United Methodist Church. Mr. Wells is survived by his wife, Bertha Wells, and daughter, Shirley Young.
Mr. Blacks.
I'd like the council to adjourn in the memory of James Paul Jones. For about the last 15 years, he was the crossing guard at the Chase Street Elementary School, and he was really loved by the entire school family. And I'll give the clerk the pertinent information. There's going to be a celebration in his honor on June 1st, and I'll give the information.
Call the roll. Oh, Mr. Burnson for an announcement.
Planning Land Use Management Committee will meet at 1:15.
Okay, now call the roll. Thank you. We are adjourned.